Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Lauren Siver, U.S. Sales and Support. You've probably heard my voice, and it probably sounded better than it does today. Please excuse my little bit of a cold, but today we're going to go through how to connect the dots with what you see in the barn to the data that you've got in your program. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to drop those in the chat. Sarah or I will be answering the questions along as we go. All right. So in this webinar, we're going to go ahead and talk about how we're going to use Uniform to connect all the dots in your program with what's going on in the barn, and why is that important to you? What are you doing every day? How does that record keeping that you're doing on a daily basis impact what you're going to see in the program? So first up, we're going to talk through a couple of case studies. They're going to cover the topics of milk production, fertility, and hoof health. And then we're going to chat a little bit about routine benchmarking and keeping your data in order. So first up, we have the milk production topic. This scenario came from a farm that was looking for sort of ideas on how to investigate milk production. We get questions about all kinds of things like this on the help desk all the time. It's really one of the most fun things for us to help out with because we get to kind of troubleshoot along with you. We know the program in and out, so our job is to help you find the data that you're looking for. So this farm asked, basically, why is my milk production not where I want it to be? We've got an 80-pound test, and we've got a 90-pound goal. What's missing? So we started out looking at some basic reports and looking at milk, current test data, things like that. And then I'll just kind of walk you through the steps that could potentially lead to a solution or an answer to that question, or even more better questions to ask about what's going on out in the real world. So first step, with a milk-related question, you've got a huge variety of tools here at your fingertips in your program that relate to different milk parameters. Just overview kind of quickly, the milk recording analysis is going to be the place where you find your DHI milk test data. Milk production to date is going to be current lactation production per cow. 305 production, that's going to be completed 305 records. And then you've got the completed lactation. So those are all kind of the individual animal, where are they at sort of items to find that list. Then you've got the milk meter yield reports. So you've got daily yields for all cows, milk meter yields that deviate above or below your thresholds that you have set, and then the 7-day milk yield. So those are all corresponding to, if you've got a process computer attached to your program, that's a robot, a milking parlor, if you're entering any of those milk meter data points from other software systems, that's going to be where those come from. The next one is SPP analysis, and I think in the US we don't really understand this, so we'll talk about it a little bit here in a second. But that's going to look at basically a corrected lactation value down to an individual day of what is a cow's potential performance as a 5th lactation cow, 50 days in milk. So it's going to kind of cross compare everybody apples to apples, kick out all the other factors, and give you a number that you can compare first lactation cow to an old cow, beginning lactation, late lactation. All those values are going to correspond, so you can really, really evenly compare cows. The next section down at the bottom, we have also relating a little bit more to the actual milk meters. But if you've got a parlor, the milking system monitor is really an interesting one to check out. Same thing with the milking times analysis. We can even get down to finding milker protocol and shift compliance in those kinds of reports. The last two that we get over to are milk production graphs. So this is going to be your traditional lactation curves compared to SPP curves, so standard peak production curves. And then you've got your lactation by production stage. So that one's self-explanatory, but you can kind of split out the cows based on those factors. The next thing that we'll jump into for this farm is the 305-day production. So we're starting to talk about why is milk production down, and then we can sort of take an overview, where is it down? This is looking at first lactation, second lactation, and older cows. And it kind of just gives you that quick summary. Where are we at? How many cows are we talking about in each of these groups? How old are they? And then you've got your average 305 milk. Fat, proteins there too, if that was part of the conversation that you were looking into. So here, if you do some quick math, you can kind of figure that those heifers are running a little bit behind compared to that maybe 80% of mature goal that you're maybe looking for out there. So we started to look into first lactation production. The next step of that was to look at the production by lactation stage. So we just quickly pulled up that report. And this is customizable by lactation stage. You can put in your own time frames there on the left-hand side if you wanted to. You can just check the properties for that. And we'll look at, again, the split up of how many cows are we talking about in each of these periods, how many days in milk, what's our average, the milk production, and then the SPP. That number is going to follow around the program. You've probably seen it a bunch of times. And basically, we're going to look at what's happening with these milk productions in these different places. You can compare them how you want to compare them. My job is to help you find them. So here you can see that the first lactation group, again, is maybe falling short of what this herd's individual goals were. So then we checked out the milk production graph. This is the first lactation milk production graph for this herd. So what we have on the bottom of this is the lactation numbers. So I have the blue line highlighting first lactation right now. In the milk production graph, you can navigate between the different lactations or view all lactations together as well. And then on the right-hand side, you can choose between milk meter recording if you've got a parlor or a robot, or milk recordings for an official milk test. And then you can also select between all animals, specific lactations, or calving months if you want to sort of narrow this down a little bit further into something specific. With this graph, you can also view the SPP. I have it simplified just to show the milk production right now because that's what we were looking at in this scenario. But you can also lay the SPP over that and see what your curves look like there. So this herd, nothing extraordinarily alarming on the lactation curve as far as a drop in a weird place or something like that. So then we jumped in to take a look at SPP. SPP, in your SPP report summary, so that's under SPP analysis, this one is looking at the entire herd. So on the right-hand side, you can see I've got all lactations selected there, and I'm showing milk. You can cross, any of those bridges that you want to change into and chase down different rabbit holes. But for this specific one, we're looking at just sort of overall herd performance to see what we can find out. And how we're going to do that in this report is that SPP, if we remove all those external factors, is trying to get to the point where all cows are created equal. So if all cows are created equal on any given day, our SPP should be flat across the herd. In this case, we see that there's a pretty low drop on the early lactation cows. This is our average SPP in the first 60 days of milk. This block is lower. And then 60 to 120, we jump up, and there's just a tiny little bit of change between 120 to 200 and 200 to 305. So it's really going to be that early lactation bit that is causing us some trouble. And we already pointed out that it was first lactation cows here, so then that drove us to ask the question, what does it look like in the first lactation for their SPP? So we split this out by lactation to look at SPP just for first lactation here. And I think this really significantly shows that the beginning of that first lactation is where we had trouble. So then that leads to the point where you can say, okay, the data shows us this is the place, and then you go out to the barn and find what is that factor? Is it space or diet or XYZ? But we're really here to help point out those places where you can find that hole in your program because of the data you have entered. So this one was kind of interesting. If you have more questions about SPP, We have a really great SPP course and webinar on Uniform Academy, and you can jump in there and check those out. You can also call us at the help desk anytime if you wanted a little bit of input or guidance on how to use your SPP or how to view it. So don't be shy to ask us questions. We're here to help with all of that. The next one we have is hoof health. And this one is a little bit different kind of a case. In the hoof health analysis kind of questions, we have a lot of different variety in how people are using hoof data, and between dairies, everybody's recording these things differently. This specific farm is asking the question of how do we check in on our hoof data? They have a couple of standard trims, and they're using a hoof trimmer that has a hoof trim software. So they're getting importing and exporting that data back and forth with their UNIFORM program. So they really just want to know, where are we? What are we doing? Is there a problem? So the hoof information can be in a couple different places depending on how you're recording that data. The lameness analysis is really great. That's where we're going to focus on today. You can also see this information a little bit in the health event analysis and also in the culling analysis, depending on how you're coding cows that leave the herd. Report writer is kind of the first place that we started with this specific herd. They wanted to see kind of what was going on and do a little bit of a status check, right? So we made a list in report writer that filtered all of the hoof imports with every event that happened in the last 60 days. So these are all of every single individual event that happened. And then we can filter that down even further to a specific treatment action or a result from that individual hoof trim. So we got the second report here with the hoof wrap list. So they can see how many wraps are we actually doing. This can be filtered in a ton of different ways too, if you wanted to have sort of an annual hoof trim report or different things like that. We can really get specific with report writer, and our team is really excellent with helping get through those specific questions. So if you're looking through something and you're trying to find a specific data point, report writer is a great place to start looking. And if you get stuck in report writer, don't get frustrated, just call us, because we're always happy to take out a report writer question. So the next place that we'll jump to is the lameness analysis. In this one, it's kind of a compilation of all of the different hoof events that you've got. The first place to start here is the properties, and that's going to be the place where you say, yes, this is a hoof trim event, this is a lameness event, I need to analyze this, or I don't need to analyze this. You check the box, you uncheck the box. Once you've got those set, you can get some real interesting data. This one here is looking at lameness by days since calving. So you're looking at days in milk, and you can see, like we expect, since we're doing that 150-day trim, at the 121 to 200 days, we've got a huge spike. So that says, okay, we're complying, we're getting all those cows trimmed. And then down on the bottom, you've got the number of cases in those periods and how many cases are repeats. So the green bars are going to be the number of cases, and the red bars are the repeats. I have this split up just by days in milk, but there are a handful of other options on the right-hand side. So you could look at this by month, by calving month, lactation number, milk yield, status, all kinds of different stuff to dig in to find a problem. Or to give your employees a high five, whatever you want to do. The second tab here is the lameness analysis, and this is looking at occurrences. So this is in the current lactation of the hoof trim cases that you've got, or the lameness cases that you've got, how many occurred one time, how many had 2 cases, 3 cases, 4 cases. So the red bars are going to total up to 100%. In this one, you can see that 44% were one time, and then you've got your repeats. So you can kind of get a quick breakdown on that one. And on the top right corner, you have the ability to filter it on a lesion. So if there's a specific lesion that you're investigating, I have digital dermatitis picked out, but you could do any of them or all. And you can see how many cases are repeating for the same foot or different foot. The next one we'll jump to is fertility. This one was fun to check out. This one was related to a protocol change with their fertility program. So they made a change to implement a new sync protocol, and they wanted to see had they improved their results. So this is a really pretty recent change since we're looking at less than 6 months of data for a reproductive event. So there's not a lot to see yet, but we wanted to start seeing, okay, is this positively impacting things or not? So we'll jump into fertility, and there's a bunch of options here. Some of these feel like they look the same. So I think it's kind of interesting to just quickly talk about what they might be. The fertility analysis overview is a really nice report. A lot of advisors really like to see that when they're at the farm because it does give you a complete look at different animal KPIs over time, and you can customize your periods and play around with that kind of stuff, barn groups, and analyze it by whatever you kind of want there. Herd fertility status is going to give you a breakdown on what's going on with the herd. We'll show you that in a second. And the freshening pattern is one of my favorite ones, just for a nice little forecast. It's a quick overview on what's happening. Fertility problems. This one can be really useful if you're trying to find out cows to cull or maybe who are your repeat offenders. You can manipulate the properties there. It's defaulting to show 5 of the worst cows in each category, but you can change it to be as many as you wanted to show. Then you've got an overview on the young stock fertility. You've got your service bull information, and some of these have different subcategories underneath them too. So you can jump into semen inventory and bulls in your library, all that kind of stuff. Service analysis is a really neat one. On the surface, it looks like some graphs, and if you're not a graph person, it probably is something you just immediately close. But if you click on the summary, there's a great report in there where you can find sex semen conception rate and technician conception rates, breedings per pregnancy, all kinds of good stuff in there, graphs, and there's some layouts for different bull success rates. And I really like that one. So check out the summary for this service analysis. Your heat and breeding intervals, pretty self-explanatory. It's going to be looking at how long cows are coming in heat and what's that return interval. Fertility analysis by calving group is also extremely interesting, and we'll look at that a little bit more. And then the fertility KPI USA, which is kind of your comprehensive look at insemination rate, preg rate, and conception rate. So we'll start there. The fertility KPI is probably the first fertility report that we go to all the time when we're investigating something like this. It just gives you a really nice overview on what's happening. So up at the top, you've got insemination rate, conception rate, your explanation, and then your pregnancy hard counts. This one is sorted to look at the conception rate, since we're trying to determine if this new program is actually doing what it's supposed to do or not. And it turns out that we have a question instead of an answer when we look at this one. We have a lot of animals marked as bred by standing heat, and we have some marked as double off sync. So the question really is, whoever's entering data, are we entering because they were on a sync program and that's the only way they get entered? Or if they were on a sync program and they were standing, do they get coded as standing? So that's definitely something to go back to the team and ask how things are being recorded and make sure that it's standard practice for everybody. As you're investigating this one, you can play around with the estrus signs at the bottom and choose all kinds of different things to view conception rate by, breeding bull, sire of the cow, all kinds of stuff. heifers can be included or not. And then in the properties, you can change around the layouts a little bit, the time period, and all kinds of stuff there too. So this one is the fertility analysis overview. Like I said, this is a really comprehensive report. It's going to be pulling in KPIs from a variety of different categories, and you can expand or collapse these to see what you want to see. In the properties, you can also change the time period and what the different blocks are. So we're looking at a monthly overview right now, but you could look at this by year or by week, depending on what you're trying to find. You can also split this out on the bottom left-hand corner by a number of different factors, lactation number, different periods. So more capability there than just meets the eye at the first glance. In this specific case, what we wanted to take a look at was that first service conception rate. So here we've got kind of a highlighted section, just to check in. Where are they at? Where have they been? Where are they going? And it doesn't really give us the answer to what happened since November, because we're looking at cows from across the whole year when we're looking at this data set. So that drove us to look at the question of, for those cows that started the program in November, what happened there? So then we pull up the calving report. And the calving groups, we're looking at each month period. So each column is a month. Those cows calved in that month. And then from there, their data is going to fill for those specific things. So it's not counting the cows that don't fit that calving interval or that calving group. So starting in the end of last year, we don't have a ton of data. The gray boxes mean that it's not a conclusive data set yet, but that starts to give us a direction on where we're going. And pretty exciting to see that the days to pregnant have decreased since that change was made, and the number of inseminations per pregnancy have decreased. So encouraging to kind of look through and see how the different KPIs go as you make different management changes. And that also led us to the question of the service analysis to see what's happening within the herd, and if we could really notice a difference. Are they sticking to their protocols and being compliant, getting everybody on the program at the right time and following through on everything? And I think you can pretty easily see that there's a significant shift in their days in milk to first service when we're looking at these calving dates. So the cows that calved, right where you see that red arrow, starting in October, are the ones that enrolled on the program first, and they're really getting tight down to that correct timed window for the program. Okay, the next thing that we want to go through is kind of some benchmarking. Like, we're going through some cases, asking some questions, and it kind of comes down to how you do things and why you do things. So when we're thinking about this, it's important to consider the why for you. So maybe that's going to be, what if you don't notice an opportunity to improve because you're not looking at your own data routinely? Or what if you have a problem later, but you don't have enough data and you just miss the mark? So I think some internal and external benchmarking that we could take a look at is the farm comparison. This one does both right in your program, it's built in. If you look at the farm comparison on the grid, the white section is going to be your farm's data, and then the colored sections, the green, blue, and yellow, are going to be the last 3 months comparing yourself to other farms in that group. You can set the group that you're comparing yourself to. You can kind of play around with it. And I'll show you where that is on the next screen. But I think it's really neat to look at these because you can see how you've performed over time and how you compare to the herds that you're competing against out there in the world. Each one of these categories on the left-hand side is going to have a ranking item, and that's going to be underlined. So each one of those items, you can see your own ranking on the right-hand side compared to other herds in that specific field. Probably the coolest part of the farm comparison is the farm comparison graph. And this one is completely internal. This is your own herd over time. The longer you use the program and the more you put in, the more value this has. You can play around with this a ton. There's, I think, like 50 different KPIs on the right that you can choose from and track that and chart that over time. On the bottom left corner, you have the sync button and the selection button, as well as a save graph preference. In the selection, that's where you're going to choose what herds to compare to. So is it herds in the US or herds in Michigan or herds that milk Holsteins or plus or minus 10% of your herd size? So you can play around and sort of compare yourself to the target that you want to be in. On the bottom right-hand corner, you've got a properties button where you can adjust some of the settings and timeframes. You can also print out this report, which is really handy if you're trying to show people maybe related to the farm or advisors some different KPIs and tracking things over time to show progress. And then the events button is where you can layer over specific farm level information. And you can see at the top, I've got those little yellow flags. So we've got changed farm groupings or nutrition formulation change, VAT supplement, new freestall barn, any of those kind of herd level things that you think you're going to remember, but let's be honest, you probably don't remember all of the things. Like you knew what you had for dinner yesterday, but how good's your recall from a year ago? So that's kind of one of those things where you can just pop that in there quick and it's going to remember that so you can chart your changes over time. In this one, we're looking at the number of calved animals, so you can see your herd size change over time. And then you can even layer that over with days in milk, or we've got fat production highlighted up here as well. So this is just a nice place to check how you're doing and if you're meeting your goals. The next thing I'd like to chat about real quick is sort of the why of the data and what happens. And I found this study in the Journal of Dairy Science, and I thought it was really interesting. They polled 88 farms in Ontario about data entry and how they were recording data. And in this group of people, they said that time was the reason that they didn't record disease events, specifically about calves. This one spoke to me. 30% of them said that they didn't record data because it wasn't analyzed. So whether that's you as the owner or manager, or maybe the employee, anybody here, if there's no purpose, then they're less likely to do it. Farm owners were less likely to record things than non-family employees. And smaller herds were less likely to record things. So that also is kind of that recall thing. You think you're going to remember everything because you've got this, but also you've got a lot tomorrow too. So if you don't write it down, it kind of gets lost. They also looked at incentives to recording information, and they said, okay, 31% said, yeah, a mobile app would help. So you've got that tool in your bucket with UNIFORM. Hopefully we're helping you there. And then 31% said a recording ease was interesting to look at to increase compliance. And they also said, okay, what else? And more time efficient systems and connecting to other record systems, but also the ability to record and analyze the data. And the last one that they found was that point of care increased accuracy of data in human medicine. So it's kind of an interesting application to pull over to our farming systems. I think all in all, I say these things to mention that recording information is really critical to your day-to-day profitability, and we're here to help you sort out what's going on the farm with your data, because you've got a lot going on. So you've at least got somebody in your toolbox to help you out with that investigation, kind of point you in the direction, and then go back to the farm with more questions. We can show you all the data points, but you have to look at the cows in the barn. So we can jump into any questions that we might have. And then, yeah, I'll leave that open for a minute. I think the big thing while we're waiting a little bit for any questions that might come is that we are your help desk and we're here for you. So as we're taking calls and helping you out with all kinds of technical things, we're also here to help you apply the program to other things too. So know that we're here for more than just a PC crash. And I don't see any more questions. This is our last webinar in the series for sort of help tips. We do have a couple program demos coming up, so if you know anybody that might be interested in looking at new herd management software for dairy or goats even, we have a couple webinars coming up that are going to be a live demonstration of that. You can also catch the replays of all of these webinars that we've done in the past few years on our website or in Uniform Academy. You can jump in there and check things out, get some tips. There's a herd analysis module available, frequently asked questions, all kinds of stuff there. So if you need help signing in, give us a call, or you can try using the password on the screen with your uniform email address. Thank you for your attention today. Appreciate everyone joining. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to us on the North American Help Desk.